Welcome back to Node Astrology. Today, something completely different than I've ever done before. I am doing a birth chart on the artist Edward Hopper. He painted the famous painting Nighthawks that he finished in January of 1942. He had been working on it for months, doing sketches. He had been a sketch artist in magazines, although he didn't like doing that. But it really gave him a different perspective and allowed him to really get into it. I watched a YouTube video about the painting and about him and his life and his influences and things. Although, of course, being born in 1882, there was not a time of birth, but this is my suspected close to his time of birth. I put it at 1:20 in the afternoon, and he was born in Nyack, New York, in the United States, 22 July 1882. So I'm going to roll right in just like I do normally. Scorpio rising. He was definitely withdrawn and not really showing everybody everything about him, but he did let people know his depth of emotion from that place of not showing everything. And his North Node in the first house was very direct. It also influenced or was influenced by his relationships, obviously. And I'll get to that when I get to his seventh house of relationships. His second house starts in Sagittarius, with his Jupiter in Gemini in the 8th, where I've placed it, and dead on top of his vertex. His Jupiter is at 20 degrees, and his vertex is also at 20, so they are literally conjunct. So anytime something happened in Gemini over that was a very transformative experience for him about communication or very tight partnerships, things of the mind, and probably how he saw himself, because Gemini is also about ourselves, about our inner self, and how we connect and communicate with that. But so he valued philosophy, life expansion, or mind expansion. But it's informed by that Jupiter and Gemini. So a lot of things around him, a lot of things that were close to him, a lot of the communication, things that he was familiar with. So lots of individual things kind of put it all together. And his second house, continued on into Capricorn. He did value business and control and structure and legacy, but not as much as the experience itself. His mind was more, the third house, his mind was more on the business of whatever it was he was doing and the legacy and transmitting that. He wasn't successful until later in life. And with the third house ruler of Saturn being in Taurus in the seventh house, definitely shows that he did really actually become famous and become a successful painter because of his wife. But it was later on in life. He was born in 1882, and he really didn't become famous until the 1920s. So he was in his 40s before he really became famous or became a successful painter. He had still been a career artist, but not successful painter before that. Although his part of fortune being in the third house, as he connected with people, he did get more out of that. And as he was more going with the flow of how things were for more people, and I'll have to do more digging into his other pieces, but a lot of his art, they started to get the idea that from individual pieces, he did touch more and more people. So the collective was more touched. So his mind did expand because of that. Or he did get more out of it as he touched more people. Fourth house, starting in Aquarius, probably very intellectual and detached. He being a thinker, even though he was very emotional, definitely a thinker. And then the rest of the fourth house being Pisces, there was the pictures and the short videos and things that I've seen, he had a cigarette in his hand. So that may have been a thing, or he just may have it just may have been a fogginess at home with Uranus in the 10th. So that would have been in Virgo. So his fourth house ruler in the 10th. So this is business. This is improved business communication. And at the time, it would have been those magazines. And I don't know if he ever got any of his things put in the paper, but that also would have been galleries at the time. Virgo is about service, and 10th house is structure, is Capricorn. So those galleries would have been to the service of the public in general, and that would have grounded his fourth house and helped him become more secure at home when those things begin to happen, or how he wanted to break out. He wanted to be free and to do whatever he wanted in the home, and to bridge worlds, to bring things together, and that's why his art. So the fifth house begins in Pisces and continues on into Aries. The fifth house ruler being in the 7th in Taurus. So there was fogginess there, but it was steady, and it was obviously divinely inspired. It was, it tapped into the deep portions of him, but it took some time. And his paintings are very tactile. They're very physical. They're very emotional. They're sensual, actually, which is what Taurus is. And Libra is also a sensual sign. It's very balanced, although it communicates balance and justice and order. And but Taurus is definitely about how he felt about himself, and when those things were more solid, then he got that. Sixth house is Aries, so he was probably very direct, and we know that he was very focused in his daily life about his art. He was very diligent at it, and people knew this. And it's obvious with sixth house ruler being in the 10th in Virgo, he was always after improvement, so that he could leave his legacy, so that people could always see that he was doing that, and that it was for he was essentially serving himself, but through his legacy. Aries, is us, is our, how we push out into the world, how we do new things, and he did new things daily, so sixth house there, and even his fifth house of about how he created was new things, but it also bridged things. Excuse the going back and forth here. I know I'm doing this very differently. Hopefully that this will it's very interesting to me. Whether it's interesting to anybody else, I don't know whether I should actually say I'm sorry or not. The seventh house is obviously loaded. Got Neptune, Saturn, South Node, Chiron, and Pluto. Pluto's the only placement here that's not in Taurus. So Neptune in Taurus, Saturn in Taurus. Neptune kind of stands out on its own there. It's at 18 degrees. Saturn is at 24, so there's no tie-in there other than being in the same sign and being ruled by Venus. And his Venus is in the 10th again. So the relationships, his relationships are ruled by his, indirectly by his communication and by his public, his serving of the public, and how he felt to do that with his art. And that it was valuable, but Saturn there took time, and also with his marriage and any of his friendships also. But South Node on Chiron, with Saturn there, that's intense. That's rough. It's very, he took the time to work on himself, and he poured himself, into that physical medium of paint, so that he could be more successful in his relationships. And overall, it seems to me that he was, because his wife has made the connection for him, so that he did get brought on and did get more shows. And that was the foundation for showing people the depth of his emotions. But Chiron there, he always had to be diligent at it. He always had to go drive in at it. But it gave him a pretty hard head. So even though being a 29-degree Cancer sun in the 9th, there was a definite slowly plodding forward, grounded, I'm right, very hard-headed approach to things, but he persisted, and it ultimately, it worked for him, and he transmitted his art to many people that feel it as intensely, or probably more intensely than I do. Pluto in the 7th house, that is definite, power, control, and it's in Gemini. It's known that he and his wife both were, shall we say, intense with each other. They were, controlling and aggressive with each other with their words. He never thanked her for introducing him to the people that got him into the gallery, so that Nighthawks did eventually become famous. It became what most known for that, and he never thanked her. And there was a short clip of a video interview, and I think she mentioned something about not having ever been thanked by him. So there was a definite restriction and power control there with the communication. The 8th house starting in Gemini. So this is, it's about obviously other people's money and rebirth and death and sex and things of that nature. But it's also communication. And he's got, Jupiter and Vertex on top of each other. I already mentioned that. And the house ruler is in the house. It's in, Gemini being ruled by Mercury. It's in the house, in Cancer. So he is, very directly communicating his emotions in a very deep way, in a very, very intense way. But you're not quite sure what he's saying. You really have to look at the overall pieces. And again, I think look back to Jupiter to try to figure that out, figure out what he's saying. He's saying something. It's very intense. It's very emotional. And he had to trust himself to open those doors to do that. And again, Jupiter opens doors. So there was a lot of open doors for him to communicate that. But it's not looking like he trusted a lot of people, although I don't know. He might have, but he may have trusted a very few people, and probably just his wife, with the workings of how his career went and being. I'm not sure. I'd have to find out. 9th house begins in Cancer, and that's where his sun is. So there's a philosophical, emotional, tie here, and so with his moon being in Libra in the 12th, ruling this house, there is a suppression of emotion here. There is a hidden emotions about, about what he thinks about balance and justice and relationships and order. But psychologically, to me, that ties right back into being the Scorpio rising. I know how the mechanical portions of modern astrological charts are drawn up and how they're connected, but you still have to look at these things as psychological, and they all feed back into each other and they all work. The 10th house begins in Leo, and with the house ruler, the sun, in the 9th. So people knew him as, as an expansive, expanding kind of person. Like, he knew he had experience, had life experience. He wasn't discovered as an actual famous artist until he was in his 40s. So he had that life experience. But Leo is the child. It is the artist. There's a very juvenile feel to it. And people knew that. But again, it's the artist. But they knew that he was always working and always improving. So Mars and Virgo in the 10th. So that spells that. And he had it made him feel good to do that, his Venus there. And when people could see that, or he knew that people could see it, or he felt it, it was definitely transmitted. So I suspect the piece of work he probably felt the best about in his life probably was Nighthawks, because that's the one that really launched him into a much larger stage. So not necessarily a self-fulfilling prophecy or anything, but when we feel good about things, good things come to us, or the things that we expect to come when we do feel good about them do. So Lilith there in the 10th, he wanted to serve in ways that he wanted to serve and work in ways that he wanted to work, which was, he didn't like doing the magazine sketches. He didn't like doing, just menial work. So he only, even when there wasn't any paintings or anything else going on, he only worked, I think they said 3 or 4 days a week. So he wasn't working every day. But again, in the 1920s, he may not have had to. He was an artist and he was known, so he was able to do that. With Uranus there in the 10th, his want, again, very intense to make his own way, but also to get, I think, published there. 10th house is Capricorn, and with Uranus there, and he did make his way in the world indirectly through that. But that was more about his 4th house. But he may have painted at home, and I don't know that he did, but this could suggest that he did. I think most painters would have, and run his business out of the home, and bridging those worlds between home and business would definitely be, like his 4th house and the 10th coming in there. The 11th house begins in Virgo and continues into Libra. So, and house ruler being Mercury in the 8th. Again, communicating with the public, or his social ideals, or the way he thought about things was probably very traditional. And he was intensely emotional about it, obviously, but may not have, communicated a lot. They said that he was very introverted, even as a child, and very kind of forlorn and intense. There was a connect and disconnect with people, unless he felt good about it, unless he felt that he could, be of service in that way, or unless he could improve himself, or, improve the other person. But the majority of that was about the actual relationship. Did he have a good connection with someone? And all right, so on to the 12th house, starting in Libra, and house ruler being in that 10th house in Virgo. So we've got suppressed emotions here, with a 9th house, 29-degree Cancer sun, with Mercury in Scorpio, being a Scorpio rising. He was intense, but there were those emotions that he didn't express about his relationships, and whether that was any of them, or about what he thought about. He probably didn't talk about politics, although he did show people how he was viewing the world through his art. So that subconscious emotion did come out, and came out in his paintings. So thank you for listening to me ramble about something that I'm actually passionate about and something that is amusing to me. I might actually do more of these, not necessarily on him, but on other artists and famous people that don't have birth times, indirect chart rectification. If I can use, their art, their music, whatever it is, I might continue to put these up. So if you guys like them, let me know. Again, you can reach me at Node Astrology on TikTok or Facebook, and I will gladly do readings for people. Just get a hold of me, and thank you.